Welcome to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Arron Bleise, and this is episode number 99. And on today's episode, we are joined by Matt Ross from the QDMA to talk about how to start up a QDMA co-op. And here we are. It is Monday, January 27th, 2020, and I'm excited to get this work week kicked off with Matt Ross from the QDMA. Today we're going to be talking about starting up QDMA co-ops or cooperatives. And basically what that is, it's basically landowners and hunters who agree to come together to abide by similar deer management guidelines over a larger area. So it's basically taking, if you have 5 acres, to try to make that into 500 or 800 or 1,000. And that's all about networking with landowners and getting on the same page and doing the same thing. Co-ops are really cool. Co-ops have been around for a long time, and believe it or not, here in Michigan is one of the biggest co-op states. And we actually get into that. Matt, he actually brings some numbers to the table and tells Justin and I about the amount of acres that are taken up basically by co-ops in Michigan. And that number is actually greater than there are public land acres in Michigan. It's really cool and fascinating. So co-ops are a really powerful thing. There are some really successful co-ops in Michigan, and I'm glad I got Matt on to talk about this. We just scratched the surface with this thing, but we are talking about how to get them started and get them sustained and keep them going, and good practices and how to get them started. So with that being said, I'm going to jump over to this interview with Matt, but first I do want to say thank you for all the support and all the feedback. You guys are really doing a good job. Keep it up. I appreciate it. So here is the interview with Matt Ross from the QDMA. All right, today we have another guest on, and it's actually Matt Ross from the QDMA. Matt, how you doing, man?
Hey, Aaron. Good. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. It's snowing here currently right now in Michigan. It's cold and getting a little bit of cabin fever, I can tell you that. The season's just, basically all the whitetail seasons are wrapping up here shortly.
Yeah, I'm in New York where you're calling, and we had snow overnight, and it's all white outside. Looks nice and pretty. Our season's been closed for a while here in the state, mid-December actually, so we're well over a month out from having it closed. But actually, there are seasons still open, not many of them, but I think the latest seasons in the country are generally in the kind of south-central part of the U.S., and some of them go as late as mid to late February. So it's, for most part, seasons are closed everywhere.
Yep, but for us, it's out. So I don't really want to travel much because I traveled all fall, so I think my season's pretty much over with. But before we get too far here, Matt, could you do me a favor and just explain to everybody listening who you are and what you do with the QDMA?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So my title for working at QDMA, it's a full-time job. I'm the Assistant Director of Conservation. So we have, like any company, we have a bunch of different departments: communications, membership services, et cetera. And we have a conservation department, and I work in that department. The director of the department is Kip Adams. Has been there for a long time. I've been working for QDMA full-time for almost 15 years. Prior to working with the organization, though, I was a member and a volunteer. I went to school for wildlife and forestry. I was really interested in natural resources, mostly because I grew up hunting. I love deer hunting. I've had a strong passion for being outdoors and for deer hunting, and wanted to make a career of it. So I went to school and tried to learn as much as I possibly could. And after getting out of school, I actually worked for a private consulting company doing forestry and wildlife management, and had heard about this organization, this nonprofit organization that was growing called QDMA, and I joined, became a member, and soon after actually started a local, what we call branches, but like a local chapter or branch in New Hampshire at the time. I was going to graduate school in New Hampshire, and So was a volunteer for years. Really believed in the mission of the organization. Spent a lot of time organizing banquets and field days and things like that. And eventually, a job opened up, and I applied and got it. And here we are, almost 15 years later. I've served a couple different roles at QDMA in the grassroots kind of fundraising membership side at first, and then I moved into a program that was doing stuff with land management, and then moved my way up to where I am now, Assistant Director of Conservation. So I oversee a bunch of different programs, some staff that are positioned around the country, one located where you live in Michigan, but folks in other places. And I work from home, as I said, but our office is based out of Georgia, and I travel a ton for QDMA. So enjoying right now kind of a low period of not traveling. It's especially when it's snowy. So yeah, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. I mean, we can get into the different programs I cover if you want, but I know that you want to talk about some specific things related to what we provide and what we do.
Yeah, I mean, you're covering a lot of areas there. You wear a lot of different hats, as you explained. I didn't realize that, and there is a luxury though being able to work from home, so that's pretty cool as well.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It's
Yeah.
great because I have the luxury of, as of this morning, it snowed a lot, so I was snow blowing at a time when other people are probably driving through it. But the other side of it is I'm always at work, and
Right.
because I am so passionate about it, my phone is always on my hip or in my pocket, and I answer them no matter what, calls or emails all the time, even on weekends. There's no getting away from it, which is good too. But.
Yep. For sure. Well, you do wear a lot of hats, but today I want to talk about one of those hats, and that is specifically QDMA cooperatives, so co-ops and starting co-ops. Now, first one right out of the gate, I'm here in Michigan. I'm in Isabella County. In the county that is next to me, Mecosta County, they have a thriving cooperative, a co-op, and it's basically the landowners have all joined together, and it's really grown into something really big. A lot of people don't know what co-ops are. Could you first explain what co-ops are and basically what they can do?
Yeah, absolutely. Cooperatives, or I'll just say co-ops from here on out, are not a new, kind of technique or thought process. I mean, really, what it comes down to at the bare bones is neighbors working together, and you can have a cooperative that's related to anything. It couldn't be any species specific, wildlife focus. So deer co-ops are certainly the most popular, where neighbors work together to manage deer populations. But there are co-ops in this country that are quail or pheasant focused. They might be habitat focused because they want to do something like, prescribed burning, and they don't have the landscape or the footprint to be able to burn enough. But if they work with all their neighbors, they can really affect a larger scale. So anyway, it could even be non-wildlife related, but co-ops, really what it comes down to is where you might have at least two neighbors, because you need two people working together to become a cooperative, knock on each other's door or agree to work on something together. They don't provide access to each respective participant. Everybody, in the terms of a deer co-op, everybody hunts their own land. Nobody has access. It's not like free reign, but they agree to a set of principles and say, hey, listen, if we all agree to kind of practice the same type of thing, we'll have a larger footprint. And that is really what a cooperative is. They can be really formal and have names and signs. This seems kind of like a regional thing throughout the country, where you might have some states, Michigan is one of them, where they get very formalized, and you see logos and signs popped up on fence posts, and they advertise that they're present. Or they could be really informal, where it might be literally two or three neighbors, and they don't have any formal meetings or anything, but they decide to sit down around a kitchen table prior to the deer season and say, hey, what are you thinking for this year? Okay, we'll agree not to do this and do that, and handshake, and then they walk away from each other and they don't talk again for a year. So there's all types of co-ops out there. Some states are a little bit more prolific, not necessarily even being formal, but they just have a lot more of them than in others, and a lot of that comes down to land ownership patterns. Where we both live is highly private. not a lot of public land. Land holdings tend to be pretty small. The average person doesn't own, 500 to 1,000 acres. The average landowner in a lot of the northern states around the Great Lakes are 40 and 60, acre parcels or smaller. So in those situations, you see more of them than in other places. But yeah, co-ops they're a great tool to achieve goals faster on a larger landscape.
Very cool. And it's been something that I've been thinking about since I've been in high school, and I've been out of high school for some time now, quite a bit of time. But it's something that I would like to get our neighbors into, but I'm always gone in the fall with my job and filming and everything, and it takes a lot of initiative and a lot of direction from someone or leadership, and I would like to be that person, but I just don't feel like I'm around a lot to be able to do that. Is that true? I mean, do you have to have pretty formalized things, things in place for things to move the way you want them to?
Well, it helps, and it depends on the landscape. What you always do need is, you don't have to be super formal, but you need somebody that's going to be the organizer, push the envelope, actually do it. Because we all get busy, right?
Right.
We all have different interests and work and family and other extracurricular activities. So typically one of the pillar things that are needed in a co-op is at least one, if not like a small committee of people, but at least one person that I like to call like the spark plug, the thing that's going to fire the engine. And that's going to be the person that might actually say, even if it's really informal and you only literally have 2 or 3 neighbors that are working together, one of those 2 or 3 people has to be the one that sends an email or makes a couple calls in, June or July and say, hey, what are you guys doing 2 Saturdays from now? Let's meet at, John or Betty's kitchen table. Even in the informal situations, somebody's got to do, I say, quote unquote, the work. Now, it's all what you put into it. You can make it super, not laborious, but you can make it really detailed and get a lot, try to grow the co-op in acreage, have meetings, have newsletters, have a Facebook group, and do a lot. And a lot of co-ops do those things. But it all comes down to that person and how much time they have and the commitment they want to put. Now, I had said to you, Arron, prior to being on this call, that I have both personal and professional experience with co-ops. Where I live in New York, we have a local QDMA branch that I, even though I'm an employee, I volunteer too. I still do, even from my early years. So I go to our local banquet and we do meetings and things like that. But the impetus of this local branch, really when it was formed about 15, 16 years ago, was they wanted to have a lot of co-ops spring up. So we have close to, 30 to 40,000 acres in co-ops in about a 4-county area. I mean, it's made up of several dozen co-ops, but so I have a lot of experience seeing some of them come and go. Some of them last a long time, including one where I hunt on. And, I'm that quote unquote spark plug. So I'm the one that usually sends an email at the end of the season, say, hey, hope everybody had a good season. Or right before we do have a new season, I send everybody an email and say, hey, we're all getting together, a month from now, save the date. So I do that on my own time because I want to have better hunting personally. So that comes down to, to you or somebody in your neighborhood that wants to put forth that effort, it's like anything in life. The more work you put into it, the better things can be. So it depends on how you prioritize that. If you personally have the time to do it, I would recommend doing it because my hunting has certainly been way enhanced since we have a co-op formed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot more people will get more enjoyment from it, I believe, I would think. To go back just a little bit, when you guys started your co-op from ground zero, what was the best, how do you basically start it? Like, is it just, let's say it's one guy, me in particular or something, that's like, I want to get a co-op started. What is the first couple steps that you need to take to really get the ball rolling and not so much make your don't really make your neighbors mad. You know what I mean? Because it could come off as the wrong thing as well. So how do you approach them, and how do you get it started?
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. I'll before I forget, if somebody's listening to this and they are interested and they don't want to write, anything I say down, or they're driving or whatever, if you go to the QDMA website, we actually have a link that's specific on QDM co-ops. And if you just go to qdma.com/co-op, COOP, there's resources there, including a video, and one of the videos is how to start a co-op. So don't feel like you need to write everything I say down. But I found one of the best ways to get a co-op started is to start by looking at a map, and start identifying properties in a general vicinity that are reasonable, realistic, that you can say, all right, if we had this block of land, whether it's between range roads, or there might be a creek or river that goes through, and say everything west of the creek over to this highway, if we could try to target without overshooting the moon. A lot of times, depending on that spark plug and how much work they want to put into it, you're talking about the one in Michigan. There are definitely co-ops in my state, in your state, that are literally hundreds of landowners, and they can grow to 5, 10, literally 20 to 30,000 acres. There's a co-op in Maryland that is like something like 30,000 acres. So it all depends on how much. Organizing that many people and all of that stuff just is kind of mind-boggling. But it all depends on locating and kind of identifying on a map a target area. And then the first thing that you would do if you're the person that's listening to this and say, I would love a co-op in my area, is to have a meeting where as many people that you can get there as possible within that focus area are invited. And typically there's a couple of tricks there to kind of help you get the co-op up and going. I always recommend to anybody I talk to about co-ops is there's likely going to be a handful of key landowners within that focal area. So, if you have like a couple square mile, or one square mile is like 600 acres, kind of focal area, there might be 2 or 3 landowners that own, 2/3 of that property or half of that property, the larger pieces that are key. If you can get them at least thinking on board ahead of time before they even show up to the meeting, pepper them with information, give them some pamphlets on what co-ops are, talk about the benefits, at least have them thinking along those lines so that when they show up, they're not truly coming in blind. That does help. Even more so, if you can identify a couple people, even if they aren't the key landowners, that are coming to that meeting that are already going to say, I'm in, that helps even more. And one of my kind of go-tos is when you hold this meeting, and you set it obviously when people are most interested in getting ready for the deer season. You could do it when the deer season ends, like right now, because they're fresh on what the season was like. If they were disappointed, if they weren't, they have that feeling fresh. Or you'd want to do it kind of when people start getting whitetail on the brain again, towards the mid to the end of the summer, where you're just about getting ready to start thinking about scouting and, observing deer from the road and all the stuff that happens that gets people fired up. So that's the time of year you want to have the meeting. And any publication or promotion or advertisement of the meeting in that focal area, you don't want to come across as owning it, as saying, listen, I am starting this co-op, or this co-op is forming, please come and learn about it, because it automatically makes that person that gets that flyer or hears about it at the local barbershop like they're an outsider. The way you want to advertise it and the language that you use is you say something like, we're exploring the possibility of starting a co-op. Come and be part of this from the beginning, because then they feel like they're part of something. If they feel like they're excluded before they even show up, you're going to lose people. So that's one of the key kind of like hot tips that I give folks is use the language you use is very important. The second tip I always say is have a third party give a presentation about deer management and co-ops there, not you, not the person that's organizing it, because then it comes from a very selfless. If you have some professional presentation being given by somebody at QDMA or your state agency, at least they're coming to hear an quote unquote expert. If you're their neighbor, they're already going to probably think, well, what's this guy know? He doesn't know more than I do.
Right.
So have a third party there. And then the third thing that I do that is almost my home run in getting a co-op started is when at the end of that meeting, when you get as many people there as possible, I try to pick a time that is convenient for folks. Don't make it inconvenient. If harvest season is happening, don't do it whenever the farmers are in the fields. Sometimes providing a meal of free meal even there, like a cookout, hot dogs and hamburgers, something like that, can get people there. But don't pick something that's inconvenient. Make it accessible to everybody. After the presentation has been given, though, I always like to have a printed map of the focus area that I can draw or color on. You can go to your, tax assessor's office and get a black and white paper copy map of all the focal area and have some highlighters there. And this is kind of my hole in one at the end is I tell the person that's organizing it, that's trying to get the co-op up and going, is when the professional presentation is done, that's when they stand up and say, hey, listen, thank you so much for that presentation. We learned a lot more about co-ops. I'm the one that organized this thing. It's obvious I want to be part of this. I would like to get one going, and I have a map here, and I'm going to take a pen or a highlighter, and I'm shading in the property that I hunt on or I own because I would like to get this started. So I'm in. Is there anybody else in? And then if you have those like 2 or 3 key people that I mentioned earlier that are already saying verbally that they're probably going to do it or they will do it, and they stand up and they do it right after you, you might have 80 to 90% of the room be standing there that weren't privy to that. And it's just like peer pressure in high school. You watch that happen, and all of a sudden somebody says, well, if he's willing or she's willing to do it, okay, I'll give it a shot. And all of a sudden it's like dominoes falling. And you might have a couple people in the room be cantankerous and say, no, I'm going to watch, I'm not doing this, no way. But I bet for the people that show up, you get the majority of them to sign up, because once this like community driven thing is happening, and you see people signing up, or, it doesn't have to be a contract. It's not like you're signing in blood or anything. Just say, all right, those people are doing it and they're trying it. And if I was you and I was a person organizing it, I would say, well, we're already up to 400 acres or 300 acres. Oh, we're up to 800 acres, or, just like, oh, Sally's in. I just say, and you hear that number growing, all of a sudden it's like, wow, we can really make a difference in this area. And that's a key thing to try.
What I'm hearing is I'm from New York as well, Matt, and unfortunately, you and I could probably have a much longer conversation about the mentality of a lot of deer hunters up there. But I always heard this it's only a 2-year-old. If I don't shoot it, the neighbor will. Like, a co-op is getting like-minded people together to solve issues like that. Like, you're in a room and you can actually understand, okay, who's the guy saying that and who's the guy saying, no, let's grow 4-year-olds. And then you got to part the seas and then team up with the people that want to work and just kind of try to shift that paradigm or that mindset into more of a management. Right. Hearing you say that, it was it's a light bulb in my head, because I've heard that so many times. Like, if I don't shoot him, the neighbor will, or, whatever excuse they have. But it's like, come on.
And that's the answer to that statement of, if I don't shoot it, the neighbor will. It also provides a platform for education, because you don't have to have a complete blanket contiguous chunk of land that's all signed up. Like, you could have a checkerboard pattern where some inside the circle are out, you know what I mean, where they might say you have non-participants, but you know what, those people are going to benefit from it. It depends, it's glass is half full versus half empty. Some people might look at that and say, well, that's not fair. That guy's going to benefit from all of our hard work. And I look at it and I say, you know what, he is going to benefit, or she is going to benefit from it, and I'm not going to let him forget it. And every year we're going to have our meeting, and I'm going to invite him again and say, hey, listen, you really should be part of this. And at some point, that person's going to see a great deer or shoot a great deer, and there are going to be rare samples or examples where somebody might just hold out forever and never join you. But it doesn't really matter because they're going to see the difference. They may not be on paper or formally joining you, but they know that it's happening. So every year we have people around us where we send an invite and say, hey, and in one case, I know some folks that are like, co-op, not managers, but the guy that's like doing all the organizing will even send their harvest stats or even trail camera pictures to people and say, hey, here's what we're shooting. And it just continually puts a seed in their mind of, this is what we're doing. And if they never participate formally, some of them will start changing their mind even internally and privately, and they'll start passing up young bucks because they know, why would I shoot a young deer if everybody else around me is passing them up and I have a chance at a real good deer? Now, everybody has that neighbor, and you're going to have some neighbors that just do whatever they want, and they'll hunt, in a different way than you do, and they will shoot yearling bucks and all that stuff, but that doesn't matter. Don't focus on that. Focus on all the positive stuff. And Justin,
right.
I mean, being New Yorkers, I can tell you, automatically, New York is getting better. One of the things I'm doing right now this time of year is our staff writes something called the Whitetail Report, and it comes out in a couple weeks. It's our kind of annual status of the deer herd. And, we track how many yearling bucks, 1-year-old bucks are in the harvest. And I'll just, without releasing the exact number, I can tell you, you're going to see a record-breaking number this year. It's never been hit before in the country. And New York is getting better, but it still leads the country in a couple categories. One is there's still a lot of yearling buck shot in New York State.
Yeah.
But where I hunt, I killed a 4-year-old buck this year with my bow. Even though I live in New York, I hunt on a place where I can kill a 3-year-old almost every year, and a lot of the co-op participants do. And that's what we aim to shoot is 3 and older because it is New York and it's hard to get them to older age class. But I personally try to hold out for older. It's been some time since I've killed a deer, but I killed a 4-year-old buck with my bow. I'm ecstatic still. Early November, it was awesome. And how many New Yorkers can say that? Very few.
Right. And I know where you're hunting at. I mean, and there's really good genetics down in your county, so it's one of those things like you got to get those like-minded people on board and establish goals and figure out who shares that goal and who doesn't. And I mean, there's going to come a time where that one person who wants to say no is not going to have an argument. They're not going to have a dog in the fight because they, like you said, they might shoot a 150 or depending however you want to break it down, they might shoot a 4-year-old, and at that time he's going to be ecstatic and it's going to be like a slap in the face. Like, yes, you did the work, but you also just turned somebody else, hopefully, to join the crew. So it's tough.
Co-ops are like this hot. They're like a hot thing. We're tracking it nationally. We estimate somewhere to between 28 and 30 million acres in the country in co-ops right now. But there are some standout states where Arron is. Michigan is one of those states. Texas is another one. We have, I kind of alluded to it before, but we have a staff member in some states that's their job. In Michigan, there's a young woman. Her name is Morgan Jennings. She's actually full-time employee with MUCC, the Michigan United Conservation Clubs, but they pay part of her salary. Michigan DNR pays part of her salary. Pheasants Forever pays part of her salary because there are actually a bunch of pheasant co-ops, and QDMA does. But that's her job. Is she's a co-op person. She does that all over the state. And I got an estimate from all of our regional co-op specialists here at the end of 2019, and she reported just over 350,000 acres in co-ops in the state of Michigan.
Holy cow.
Which is now higher than the number of acres in state game areas, meaning there's actually more land. I mean, most of the state of Michigan is privately owned in the Lower Peninsula anyway, but there's actually more land in formalized co-ops than there are in public hunting state game areas. And with the touch of a button, she can email the leaders of all those co-ops and communicate something. Chronic wasting disease or bovine tuberculosis are 2 really bad diseases that are in the state of Michigan. If the state has to change a regulation that's regarding either one of those, she can communicate with thousands of hunters with an email and say, hey, please start doing this. Or if something happens and they want to start doing some kind of data collection, she can say, hey, can you all start turning in samples of hair or blood on does that you shoot, or whatever. The control over that type of number of acres and number of hunters is just amazing. And Michigan is one of those states that you drive around and you see QDMA logos on signs that say the word co-op everywhere. It's almost like QDMA owns a third of the Lower Peninsula, but we don't. I mean, it's just all community-based volunteer, that neighbors working together. That's what it is. People that knock on each other's door and say, hey, let's work together, which that's what this country was built on, right? I mean, it's kind of amazing. Deer bringing that kind of neighborhood effort together is amazing.
Right. Now, does it matter how much land you have access or own or hunt on to get one started?
No, not at all. I mean, I know people that are in co-ops. There's a co-op here in our state that's close to 5,000 acres, but it's well over 100 landowners in it, and there are people in there that have 5-acre and 10-acre parcels. Even better, if you're the person that owns 2.5 or 5 acres, and you're the one that got the 5,000 acre co-op up and going, isn't your hunting better because of it?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to own. There's no magic number. Obviously, the larger the acreage, the bigger the benefit in the general community. But at a scale of what the average is, I think our national average is about 1,500 acres is what the average co-op is in the country. I don't know what it is in Michigan. I'm guessing it's probably not far from that. It might be a little bit smaller. So you don't have to, and I'll give you an example. I hunt on three places that I hunt primarily here in New York. I can go behind my house. I have 7 acres, and there's public land behind there. There's a county forest, and behind that is public accessible nature conservancy land. So I can literally walk out my back door and hunt. I mostly will drive about 15 to 20 minutes to other places because there's more deer there. Where I live, it's in our northern zone, and it's very forested, getting up into kind of the Adirondack Mountains, and deer density is lower. And I don't have the opportunity to shoot as many deer here because the state regulates it, because I'm in a zone where you can't shoot that many deer. But I can drive 20 minutes away into our southern zone, and I have access to two farms. One of them is brother-in-law's farm that we do work with some neighbors. And one of them is our co-op, and I don't own a stitch of land in it. It's my best friend, and I met him through the QDMA. And the reason that co-op started was we started talking at banquets afterwards, and he invited me to hunt on his place because we were hitting it off and becoming really friendly, 10, 15 years ago. And I said, hey, why don't you work with your neighbors? Because he just was situated in a place that had a bunch of farms around him. And his comment to me at that point was, they'll never do it. There's no way. They're not going to want it. We've been doing this for years. They wouldn't do it. And what that was an artifact of his father and his grandfather basically not liking their neighbors. And it was just kind of ingrained in them that, they're not going to do it. And I said, will you give me the chance? I don't own any of this, I said, but if I invite them to your kitchen and we sit down with these 3 farms and you guys and your 2 other neighbors, and just give me a shot to give them a pitch. And he said, you could try. He goes, there's no way. He goes, I'll let them in my house. I'll let them come to my kitchen table, but I don't think they're going to want to do it. And lo and behold, because I was not him, I was a third party. I gave a very detailed presentation that was full of deer biology and all kinds of other, artifacts of the benefits. And they signed in, and they said, all right, let's give it a shot. And we're going into our 11th or 12th season this year.
Wow.
And, not without some heartache and some headaches. I mean, we've had tons of, we lost a property at one point. We gained some acreage at one point. We've had drama here and there. But, I mean, I learned in school, going to school for wildlife biology, the managing the wildlife is the easy part. It's managing people that's the complicated part. That is true.
Yeah.
That is an absolute true statement.
So when you get one established, let's say, I mean, doesn't matter how many people or what it is, let's just say there's a co-op established and you're part of it. What are some good goals to set, right off the bat? I mean, I know that's kind of a broad question, but like what are your like maybe top 3 to 5 goals that you really provide or think that everyone, should start with?
I will answer what I think and what I probably most commonly say, but it's to be clear, it's not up to me and it's not up to the person giving the presentation. It is 100% up to the participants. And I say that when I give a presentation about starting a co-op. Like I said, co-ops can be around pheasants. There are literally pheasant co-ops in the state of Michigan. There's a bunch of them. So if the people in the room get together and they're most angry or most passionate or whatever about, wanting to see more older bucks in the herd, then one of the goals has to be don't shoot young bucks and coming up with some rule about that. But just as common, I've seen co-ops start because trespassing or poaching is an issue. They're happy with the deer hunting, but they're really fed up with people road hunting or trespassing or something. So a co-op goal might be to form some kind of chain, phone list, cell phone list where they can text each other and be better communicators with each other when somebody shoots. And we literally have a couple co-ops in our area in New York this year that literally got tickets written for folks because somebody heard a gunshot or saw somebody creeping down the road and they reported the vehicle, and then all of a sudden they posted it on the co-op Facebook group page and it went, relatively speaking, viral. It got posted and shared, and all of a sudden they figured out whose car it was, and the person got visited by the conservation officer. So the goals really come down to the people in the room. So after you do that magic where you have the highlighter and the map, the people that are signed up, the ones that say they want to do it, the very next step is to say, what do you guys have the biggest beef with? What do you want to see change? What do you want to see better? And have a very open brainstorming session, like a very open discussion of what can we do? And if, it's not going to be unilateral, 2/3 of the room are probably going to want one thing, half's going to want another, you're going to have overlapping goals, but that's what should be identified. Now, typically on a deer herd side, generally co-ops are formed because they want to see more older bucks. That's the most common. And what I tell people, I gave a presentation at a national conference about co-ops a couple of years ago. The reality is dangling a carrot in front of a rabbit works, and the same thing with deer hunters. If larger antlers make people do something, meet each other, talk to each other, shoot more does, that's a big one. A lot of state agencies want to see a higher doe. Your state, Arron, is one of them. Michigan is, I hate to say it, but in the bottom, atrocious with the doe harvest in areas where they need it. You guys need to shoot a lot of deer in places, and a lot of hunters generally just don't do it. And if the carrot dangling in front of the deer hunters to shoot more does is to have bigger antlers, dangle that carrot. You know what I mean? Just say, hey, listen, if you do this, these are the things that are going to be better. So generally on a deer side, it's see older bucks, maybe obviously shoot them, but being able to see a higher representation of older bucks in the deer herd would be one. Reduce deer density. A lot of times you'll have farmers come to co-op meetings, even if they don't hunt, but they come because they have deer damage issues. And if you can get them to show up at a meeting and say, hey, listen, we're going to rally the hunters in the area to shoot more deer, they'll come and they'll sign up their 100 acres or 500 acres or 1,000 acres and say, listen, if you guys start shooting more does around here, I'm in. That's right. Another one that's a big one.
Yep.
And there's a bunch of stuff that falls under that.
And I know we're crunched on time here. We're coming up to the end, but I do want to sneak this last question in here possibly. And, a lot of people, they probably think like, how long should a landowner or co-op member commit for? Is there a set time? Like, Rome wasn't built overnight. So it's like, is there, a certain like 2 to 3 years you should commit for, or a year, or does it really matter?
Yeah, it does matter. It depends on the goals. Obviously, if you're trying to see an increase in older bucks, you got to give them time to get there. Or if you want to see a reduction in deer density, you got to give a couple seasons of effort, because generally it takes the hunters a couple years to kind of build up the confidence, I guess, in the system or the need. And I'll give you an example. So to answer your question, I'd say give it a minimum 3 years. You know, if you're quote unquote signing up, say, let's give it 3 seasons and see what we can do. And after 3 seasons, if your goal is to see older bucks and all you do is get a bunch of people to pass up yearlings, you're going to see older bucks. Generally, the second and third season, people are incredibly happy. Satisfaction levels are like way up. And that's actually one really cool research project out of Michigan as well, a project out of Michigan State, Arron. They looked at satisfaction levels of hunters and co-ops were like 3 times the rate of hunters on land not in co-ops.
Really?
So people are just much more, I mean, statistically shown, I think 70 to 80% satisfied versus like 30 to 40% in general with their deer hunting. So the state, Michigan DNR, took note of that, and is why they pay part of the salary in a co-op specialist, because hunters are happier in co-ops. Anyway, so I give it at least 3 years on the buck side, and on the doe side, it still takes a couple seasons. And I'll give you an example. So we had to shoot a lot of does on the co-op that I started. One of the farms signed up purely because they want to see deer density dropped. And the first season, I told the guys they needed to kill 20 to 30 does, and we only killed about 14. And this was on like 1,600, 1,700 acres, 3 farms, about 500 acres apiece generally. And we only killed 14. The second season, I said, guys, you didn't do as good of a job. We needed to kill more. So we got up to about 20 to 25 the second year. I said, all right, well, there's still a lot of deer based on data I was collecting. Let's do it a third season. And then the third season they did it. And then we started seeing a difference after that third year of actually shooting some does. And we actually started cutting some trees down in a forestry management program, because I didn't want to start forest management until we reduced the number of deer, because the number of deer out there was so high that I was fearful that if we started cutting trees, the deer would just eat every little sapling that came up. So it was timed very intentionally. So yeah, you got to give it a couple seasons, at a minimum 3, I would say, to kind of dedicate yourself to.
From a biological standpoint, even when it comes to like shooting your does, genetically and biologically, your younger does are the most genetically superior. If you think about the way bucks compete for breeding rights, those more dominant, more mature, like older bucks that you're seeing traits in that you want passed on, those are the ones that are going to breed first. And those are the ones that are going to get those first hot does. So those fawns are born first. And now that fawn may not be a buck fawn, it might be a doe fawn, but therefore it's the youngest. So if you can identify, just like you do with bucks, identify those older does, take them out, when you've established a number to shoot, do your best to focus on those older does. And just keep in mind, it's not something you see a result of. It's not like if then so this, but you have to give those genetics time to show you what you've done, and that's not going to happen without the time to let them grow old enough to show you that, and the nutrition to maximize that genetic potential. So there's a lot more in it than just opinions of people, but as long as everyone understands the same goal, like just give it a chance, give it some time, and know what you're committing to long term.
Yeah, the nutrition thing that you hit on at the end is really true. There's a really cool research where they took deer from parts of one state that were really in a part of the state that was not very productive. So, poor soils, not a lot of nutrition in that area. And they took a doe from there and brought her to a place that had a lot of good food, or actually offspring from her fawn. And they raised that deer on really, really high nutrition food. And you would have thought that deer would show its potential. Well, that actually didn't happen. It took 3 generations. So that fawn gave birth to another fawn, and then that fawn gave birth to another fawn. And it wasn't until the 3rd generation of being fed really good food that showed where deer started actually meeting their potential nutrition. So there's like this lag effect from all of that. And older does are actually, they're not genetically different, but they are better mothers. That's one of the other things too. If you're trying to reduce deer density, if you could try, it's very difficult, almost impossible to figure out which does are the oldest. They don't really, they're not like bucks. It's not like a larger doe is necessarily an older doe, but the ones that are older are the best mothers. And if you remove a higher percentage of older does, you're more likely to reduce deer density quicker because the best mothers are then taking off. And the ones that are out there, I think what Justin was saying is they're more likely to have, instead of twins, they might have singles. Or if they do have twins, one of them might survive and one of them might not because they're not the best moms yet. They haven't learned yet. So that's all part of the process. And we're kind of going down a biological rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a different conversation.
Well, you did spark one thing I do want to ask before we do wrap this up, and we will wrap it up after this one, I promise. And this is something I want to do on my farm as well, because I'm trying to figure out what the deer density is on it, and I've been trying to do it for the last 3 years. So what is a practice that any landowner or hunter out there, hunting a piece of property, what is some good practices to be able to figure out how many does and deer you have on your property, and how to come up with that number and how many does you do need to shoot?
Yeah, there's a couple really good techniques. Anybody can do them. I'll plug our website again, and if you go on to QDMA.com and just type in my name into like the search engine there, you'll probably see some of the articles I wrote. I've written 3 or 4 on exactly what we're talking about, like how to know how many does to kill, when you kill too many. I actually put a worksheet up where you can actually fill some stuff out, and it's got hyperlinks, and it tells you, when you need to increase or decrease your doe harvest. So try to find that on there. But the 3 easiest ways to do it are either a baited trail camera survey. Now, where we both live, Aaron, we can't because we live in states that don't allow baiting.
Right.
Currently, I know there's some stuff going on in Michigan right now as we speak, but
yep.
I can't put bait out, and I can't put a camera on it. So you can do camera surveys that are unbaited, but scientifically they have not been kind of proven yet to show good numbers. So I don't do that because I can't bait, and I don't feel like I can get good data off of just putting a camera out. So the other ways that I do it, if you can bait, I'd say a baited camera survey is the way to go. It's relatively easy. You do it at the end of the summer, and you can get a deer density estimate and some other things from it. I instead will, in the spring, so usually around late March, mid-April, that time when the snow's off the ground up here, I will go out and do a pellet count browse impact survey. Those are the other 2 methods, and I do them every year. Well, every year I have these transects, so I basically pick a line in the woods, and I walk that same line every year, and every 100 feet I stop and basically count deer crap in a 4-foot circle, and every other year I do the same transects, and in addition to doing the deer pellet count survey, I assess how hard the deer are browsing the vegetation around, and I chart that over time. And it's basically a couple hours of walking, and I'm out there shed hunting that time of year anyway, so I use it as an excuse to go shed hunting, and you can use that technique to assess deer density as well. Those are ways that I do that here in New York. But I would recommend, there's a bunch of different things and resources on QDMA's website you can learn that from. And actually, in Michigan, Aaron, the MUCC QDMA employee that I mentioned earlier, she holds workshops on how to do some of that stuff.
Very cool. Because what I'm going to do is I might even reach out to her, or I'm definitely going to put some links into the show notes for all this stuff as well, for people to be able to go to QDMA and find some of these articles. So, I know we got to wrap it up right now. We're up on time here, but we got to a lot of questions, but not all of them. And maybe we can do this again just to kind of, keep going with this. And I might actually reach out to our listeners and ask, if they're interested in a co-op, what they want to know as well. And we might do a Q&A on that. So that might be something in the future we do. But I do have to say thank you for coming on and doing this. And I really appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, my pleasure, Aaron, Justin. I really, enjoyed the time speaking with you. If you guys ever need anything else, let me or QDMA know. And kind of a last plug before we have to bail is, I'll encourage folks to go to QDMA's website if you're interested in co-ops and just look at it's under the conserve menu. You'll see a thing on co-ops. You'll probably get a lot of questions answered right there. I mentioned earlier, we do have actually full-time employees that do this as a living for free. If you live in Alabama, Missouri, Michigan, some other places, you can contact our co-op specialists and they can come help. They'll be the person that gives your presentation. So you got to organize it. You get somebody, get a bunch of your neighbors together, but they will show up and reach out to them. If you guys want to do a part 2 or a Q&A, either I can be on there, which I'm happy to do, or you could reach out to some of our regional folks and talk about their successes and what they do, because that's what they do, and they're really good at it. And lastly, if you're a deer hunter and you're not a member of QDMA, I really encourage everybody to join. That's kind of how I started my journey. I became a member. It's a great magazine. I get it. But for not much money, it's $35 a year. You're part of this really great movement of promoting good deer management and healthy deer. And I'm super passionate about it and have been for a long time before I was an employee. So it's coming from the heart. So I hope you guys are QDMA members and your listeners all become one too.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll put a link to that stuff as well to become a member in the show notes, and hopefully we can get some people on board there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. And again, I greatly appreciate you coming on doing this. And we'll stay in touch and maybe be able to do this again.
Perfect.
And there it is. I want to thank Matt for coming on and doing this. And this won't be the last one we do one with Matt. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's got a lot of data that backs up his facts and his philosophies. So it's pretty cool to have him on here and really get into the weeds with this stuff. So we're going to get him back on, and we're going to talk about some more stuff with co-ops and just herd management in general. So I appreciate you guys, again, supporting the podcast. Don't forget, go over to wherever you listen to the podcast, leave some feedback, leave a 5-star rating. It's greatly appreciated. So thanks again, guys, and we will see you on the next podcast.